Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Oops. What happened here? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Mubarak to everyone for coming. Or I should say thank you for coming. Ramadan Mubarak. I hope you're all well and enjoying the blessings of this Ramadan. We will start in just 1 minute. I'm going to iron out a few things here. All right. So I hope everyone's receiving the blessings of this holy month and that your fasting is going well, inshallah. So welcome to this live stream. My name is Ilyas, and I'm glad to offer a few thoughts for you to consider during this month. So the title of this presentation is Ramadan, the struggle between clay and light. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that the human being is made from the teen, the sounding clay, and our form is taken from this primordial substance, and Allah brings the essence, a divine essence, into this form. And so in the human life, we struggle with contending between these two, that you have a soul and that is illuminated, manifested through the spirit, through the ruh, and through the form that is made of this sounding clay, this primordial substance. And much of the struggle in life exists exactly in this relationship between these two things. So I want to say a few words about that will be of benefit to you, inshallah, and help you as you traverse your spiritual path in life, and in particular this month of Ramadan. So we understand in our tradition of Islam that, and in the world traditions in general, where fasting is a spiritual practice, that fasting during the month of Ramadan in Islam, for those who have embraced this path, is an obligation. And so in fulfilling the outer obligation of the fast, there is a reward for that. And there's an outer reward. But unfortunately, unless one really investigates the experience of the fast, whether during Ramadan or at other times, unless you take the time to contemplate, consider, and investigate the experience of fasting, then you might actually completely miss the inner benefits of the fast, which are much more than a tally of reward, but a spiritual transformation. And so if you fall into the bad habits that have unfortunately become characteristic of our community during periods of fasting, if you fall into those bad habits, which are now pervasive and have practically become norms in our societies, then it nullifies the barakah that you accumulate through fasting, which is inner, which is within the soul as well as the body, and in a sense you will have missed the transformative power of fasting. And so we must ask ourselves, what is the point of fasting really if if when you break your fast, you gorge yourself and you pass out, and then you wake up and socialize for a few hours and watch television. And as many of you know, this happens for lots of people. So,
Assalamu alaikum, Ilyas.
So please, alaikum assalam, thank you for joining. Please keep silent on the audio there. There are lots of people on this webinar, so unfortunately you won't be able to, if you don't mind, keeping your audios on silent, please, for now. So, welcome everyone, and yes, be patient with this process. This is the first time I'm doing this. I'm using, it's broadcast on YouTube, as you know, and some of you can access it also through Google, as a Google Hangout. All right, so, which I'm learning how to use all of this technology right now in partly real time. All right. So going back to our discussion, we want to take the time to really consider what is the transformative power of fasting that Allah offers us. And so you have to take the time to investigate, to tune into your experience during the fast and at the time of breaking your fast, and at the time after the fast until you resume your fast. So, so this is what we're dealing with. So I'll begin with the clay that I referred to. So clay, the primordial substance is heavy, it's static, you could say dead, although everything has a degree of life because it comes from Allah. It's resistant to change. It's cold and contracting, and it has a descending quality. And if you fall into it, then it can be easy to be negative because there's a lack of energy and liveliness. So in terms of experiences, we're tuned in at that level when we're tired, lethargic, conflicted, despondent. So these are all characteristic of stuckness. So here are the things to watch out for during Ramadan and at other times of fasting. I'll start with food, the obvious. So you want to be cautious of any kind of stagnation. And stagnation leads to toxicity. Toxicity leads to further inertia. And where your digestive system is basically preoccupied. So here are 4 simple things to be mindful of. One is quantity of food, that you want to be very careful of overeating. It is said that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the son of Adam only needs a morsel of food sufficient to keep his spine straight, and otherwise to fill your belly with 1/3 of food, 1/3 of liquid, and 1/3 of air. So if we really follow this injunction, then we wouldn't be eating that much in general, and certainly not the sorts of quantities that people tend to consume when they break their fast. The moment that the volume in your stomach reaches a certain level, stretch receptors are activated, and your brain gets a signal to stop eating. And this is a subtle signal, and it's very brief, and it's most often ignored. People just drive through because there's the tendency to eat unconsciously is pervasive. It is the norm. And so unless you're eating with a certain amount of tranquility, taking your time and really tuning into the experience rather than being distracted by socializing or watching television or some other preoccupation, then you're going to miss that signal, which comes in a short window of time and is subtle. And you will then continue eating, and then at that point it's all over. It doesn't matter. And then, of course, your stomach stretches and keeps stretching to accommodate greater volumes of food and drink, and it gets bigger because you're giving your belly and your body the message that you want to take in more. So it will begin to accommodate, but your stomach was the right size. In that first stage of human experience, your stomach was the correct size. It was written exactly to correspond to your constitutional type and your frame. Whether you're a mesomorph, an endomorph, or an ectomorph, your stomach was perfectly suited to your type. But when you start to give it another message, it actually increases in size because everything is flexible in the body. And now you're challenging your form to be other than what was written for you. So be mindful of quantity. That's the short of it. Secondly, we tend to eat ridiculously complex combinations of food today that our ancestors never consumed. And if you look at how the Prophet ﷺ ate, it was extremely simple. Milk and some dates, and then he would pause for some time if he were to eat anything after that. So he would keep food very simple, and he would be very cautious about combining food in different ways. Now, hardly anyone eats that way today. So you should consider that when you have a meal, especially when you're breaking a fast, and your system is very sensitive, are you taxing your system by eating complicated foods, food combinations, much less a smorgasbord of 5 to 10 different dishes? So if you're bloated after a meal, it's a sign that it was too complicated. If you have putrefaction, which is a form of indigestion, which comes from combining differing kinds of food like sugar and protein, let's say eating a lot of fruit right after you eat meat, for example, then your digestive system will go on a bit of a rebellion, and you'll get putrefaction and a kind of fermentation in the belly, and you will get sick, slightly sick to very sick, and it will manifest as loose stools, digestive taxation, digestive insufficiency, and so on. So keep your meals simple. And of course, the type of foods that you choose. Some foods are very, they contribute to density. They contribute to resonance with the clay aspect of your being. What does that mean? It means that, if you worked on a farm, you would wake up early in the morning and you would eat food that, as we say, sticks to your bones. Meat, butter, whole milk, none of that light stuff. So the butter would be like fatty butter, and you drink whole milk, which was pretty creamy. It was somewhere between heavy cream and whole milk. And maybe meat and potatoes, because that would stick to you, and you could last for hours doing hard labor on that kind of food. And so, but of course, hardly anyone lives that way today, working the fields. So you needed food that would last in your system for a long time, that wouldn't break down very quickly, and would provide a constant, stable source of energy for you. So fat is very important in the diet. And so, but when you're fasting and you're trying to become lighter, and you want your attention drawn to subtler realities, to Allah, to paradisal, heavenly dimensions, to principles and archetypes, to virtue, to the work of the soul and the heart, then you want to be careful of foods that bring you powerfully into the body. After all, you're fasting. You're trying to not be so entrenched in the world of form and in the flesh. So foods that contribute to that, interestingly enough, the Prophet did not eat garlic, and onion and those kinds of foods that grow in the earth and not off of a vine or bush or tree are heavier and have that level of vibration. So you want to limit those foods. Also strong foods, coffee, acidic, highly acidic foods, black tea. So in general, during Ramadan, actually, it's a great time to be vegetarian. And unfortunately, because most meat is halal for us, then many people in our community go on a bit of a crusade, thinking that because we can eat meat, then therefore it's okay to eat as much meat as we want and as we possibly can. And people feel that they actually haven't had a meal. They haven't eaten actual food if there isn't meat on the plate. And it's usually not some tiny morsel side dish on the corner of your plate, but it's actually the main course. And our ancestors did not eat like this. The Prophet ﷺ did not eat like this. And I would actually recommend that maybe during Ramadan you be a vegetarian, because meat, again, is one of those foods that will bring you powerfully into the clay and make it very difficult to reach towards the light. So consider that. And if you do have some meat, maybe a tiny bit once a week is actually entirely sufficient. And there's a big protein myth out there, which I won't elaborate too much on, but you can get all that you need nutritionally through fruits and vegetables and whole grains. And I would recommend a book called The China Study that provides the actual evidence for that. But the reality is that we are not from the world, and we don't ultimately need the world in the way that you think that we do. That the reality is that we are primarily nourished in a very substantive way through spirit, through the ruh, through the subtle psychic centers of the body, which are powerfully activated when you do spiritual practice. And they become quiet and dormant when you do not do spiritual practice, and especially when you are enter negative states. And you'll notice that when you are in negative states, you will actually be more hungry, because you'll be limited to being nourished and satisfied through the world. So you will need more food. But the more spiritual practice you do, the less you will actually need nourishment through the world. And this is one of the secrets that modern science just doesn't quite understand. But there's a real science behind it, which I won't go into too much today, because we just don't have that kind of time. So you want to know that spiritual practice activates these centers, and you will be nourished through them, and you don't actually need the vitamins and minerals and protein and so on and so forth, sugar and fat, that a lot of people are convinced you cannot live without. And that's actually not true. You need them, but far less than you can possibly, than many of you might imagine. So going back to the four things: quantity, complexity, type of food, and then also pace of consumption. That if you eat too fast, you will actually digest less of your food. You are more likely to create a digestive disturbance, and it's not good for your soul. That you're not cultivating good habits of character, and you're not cultivating patience and satisfaction with a very basic life experience, which is eating. And so not only is it not good for you physically, but it's not good for you spiritually. So moving on, beyond food, you want to be extremely careful of things that should be avoided at all times, really, but especially during times of fasting, because if you consume them, you'll become even more sick than at other times. And those are recreational poisons, which are all basically toxic to varying degrees. So nicotine, whether you get it through cigarettes or shisha, caffeine, sugar, mainly white sugar, and other recreational drugs, narcotics, which should go without saying, but here we are. So avoiding the recreational poisons. Then talk, speech, minding your speech. So especially during times of fasting, when you're trying to withdraw from the world and reach for heaven, you want to be very careful of anything that scatters your attention and barakah. So talking in such a way that disperses your energy and spreads you thin. It will be draining. It will leave a kind of stain on your heart, and it will distract you from the real work at hand. And then, of course, fourth is entertainment, whether it's social entertainment by hanging out with your friends, joking around, telling stories. And that also is, or sitting in front of the television or listening to music. Music that is for the sake of Allah, I would say, is actually completely fine and actually good, because it directs the heart towards heaven, towards Allah, towards principles and contemplating the deeper realities of existence. And so, but otherwise, entertainment is dispersive, draining, it stains the heart. It can also program you into bad habits and distract you from contemplation of your life and spiritual principles. All right, so the general caution here is to avoid what scatters and nullifies the barakah that you accumulate through your spiritual practices, which includes fasting and everything else that you would do during Ramadan, recitation of Quran, praying the salat, doing dhikr, spending time in contemplation and reflection, personal evaluation, and so on. So this way you avoid the trap, the danger of having your consciousness mired in heavy negative, experiences. All right, so here we are. So that's the clay. Density. So it takes effort, beginning first with your intention. Inna al-a'mal bin-niyat. Verily, deeds are but, actions are but by intentions, as the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it takes the correct intention and then effort to extract the soul from the clay, to create some space and distance from the clay, so you won't be mired in it, bogged down in it. All right, so let's move on now to light. So the soul is a subtle body which is made from some kind of a light that has luminosity, that radiates. And it can be like a dim light, like a little candle, or it can be like a blazing sun. And that depends on your maqam. That depends on the person that you have become as a result of the life that you've lived. So some people are radiant like a blazing sun, and others are like a little pilot light that is easily blown out. If you do a self-evaluation, you can know it's not a mystery. You can have a sense of that. Some days you'll feel that your light is dim, and other days you'll feel that it's bright. So light engenders lightness of being. It's dynamic, it's alive. It emerges from the divine light. So Allah extends something from His nur that gives life to us, and so it's divine. So it's flexible. It's not resistant to change. It's accommodating. It's expansive. It can ascend. It can lift you up. It's positive. And people attuned to light are energized, hopeful, inspired. So here are the general considerations to nurture this light and to help extract your soul from the tendency to inertia and confinement in the clay. So you want to hang on for 1 second. I need to make sure this door is shut. All right. Okay, a little commercial break. So, and we're back. So, general considerations in attuning, nourishing, nurturing light. So during Ramadan, during times of spiritual practice, what are we doing? We're withdrawing from the world. We're withdrawing from density, from the clay, even still while we're actually in the world. So it is to be in the world, but not of the world, to realize your spiritual nature. So to that end, you want to be very careful of conflict, what brings you into the clay, into density, to struggle and tussle with the clay. Avoiding idle chatter, once again. And to take the time, especially during this month, for self-evaluation, to review and evaluate your relationships, and which basically boils down to your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with yourself, with your soul, to evaluate your nafs, with your friends and family, especially dealing with any conflict resolution that needs to happen, and within your community, also resolving any active conflicts as much as possible. As we know, before you can, we're advised that, before you go on Hajj or pilgrimage in general, to make sure that you go with a light heart, that you apologize and forgive wherever possible. So Ramadan is a month of mercy and forgiveness, so it really lends itself to that, to conflict resolution. So we want to move from illusion to truth. This is what we're doing. We're moving from illusion to truth. Extracting the soul from density and all the things that bring us into density, despondency, hopelessness, fear, anxiety, worries, frustration, irritability, anger, depression, sadness, and grief, all the emotional states and all the negative thoughts that give birth to them. To do your due diligence, to evaluate yourself, to evaluate your life, to notice your patterns and tendencies, to identify all of that unresolved stuff. So what does this mean practically? It means that during Ramadan especially, you want to take the time on a daily basis, actually, and more time perhaps on the weekend when you're not working, to sit down and spend half an hour to maybe even a few hours studying yourself and your life, and doing rigorous self-evaluation to see, to bring your spiritual work into your flesh. And everything that is unresolved in the soul is recorded in the body. So it's sitting there, that the body makes sure that the soul does not ascend towards heaven, whether at death or in this life, without actually clearing its accounts. So all of the things that we harbor in the soul are recorded in the body, and as we know, your body testifies against you when you're in the grave. So when you do spiritual practice in a rigorous and intelligent way, and you're not just going through the motions, you're not just trying to fulfill the obligations without actually paying any attention to the deeper significance of those obligations. So we understand that fasting is an obligation for Muslims in the month of Ramadan, but at the same time, we also know that Allah doesn't need our fasting. So it really begs the question, what is the point of the fast? And one of the deep possibilities is that it's an opportunity for transformation of the soul. That when food and drink is withdrawn, that the soul comes to its knees, and the body and its appetites come to its knees. And the appetites are not able to sink their teeth into you so easily because they are undermined from below. And this is an incredible, blessed opportunity to tame the nafs, and to put the soul that is oriented towards Allah back into the driver's seat of your life, so that your life is once again directed towards heaven for the sake of Allah. And so again, I say, if you gorge yourself when you break your fast, what is the point of the fast? If you have learned, it is as if you have learned absolutely nothing from the fast. If immediately you put the nafs back in the driver's seat, what is the point of the fast? What is the point of having fasted for 30 some odd days? The opportunity is for transformation of the soul. So perhaps breaking your fast could look very different. You eat a modest bowl of food and you eat one thing. Maybe it's soup. Maybe it's tahina and bread. Maybe it's with some water, and then after that you have a little bit of something, milk or freshly squeezed juice. But it doesn't have to be this heavy, elaborate, complicated meal with course after course where you dive right into dessert right after the main course. And then you pass out bloated, and then you have indigestion, and you oversleep and miss Fajr, and it goes on. And the next day you're exhausted. And sugar spikes in the bloodstream and crashes. And so this is counterproductive. So the idea is that discipline that you develop while you're fasting is extended to the time of breaking the fast. And so that you maintain that presence and that discipline when you eat, that you cultivated while you were actually fasting, and you extend it all the way to sunrise. That you never lose control. And I'm not necessarily saying that you are in complete control, because of course that's an illusion. But your soul can be dedicated to Allah in a way that's 24/7 and not just during the fast. Because many of you have seen that horrible scene of iftar where people are fighting to get in front of the line, and all adab and awareness of other people is out the window. And we get into this kind of feeding frenzy, stuffing our faces. So I'm being critical of myself first and foremost, and I'm using some strong language at times, and I don't mean to scare you or insult you, but to invite you to something better. Because you all know it's true. I mean, I can say these things because I've experienced them. Myself, personally, I've made all of these mistakes, and it's not pretty, and it's hard to look at oneself in the mirror and to do this evaluation, but it's necessary. And so I wish for my brothers and sisters the best, and I know that we can do better than we are actually doing. So it's sad to see people fight over food, and when there is plenty to go around, but we're overeating. And the nafs, when they take over, your nafs don't, the appetites of the clay, the desire for comfort in the loins, in the belly, and in the chest, which roughly corresponds to the appetites for sexual pleasure, for digestive pleasure, and for pleasure of space, like living in a nice house or living by the seaside or something like that. Those appetites, they don't care about you. They seek exclusively their own satisfaction. And they will consume you in the process. And you need only look at any junkie to understand what I'm talking about. That a junkie, a drug addict, will sell his mother down the river for a fix. And if you think I'm joking, go and talk to a junkie. A person will sell his brother out to get a fix, because that's how powerful the cravings are that have been amplified through the use of destabilizing toxic substances like drugs. So beware. Why are we prohibited? Why is it a prohibition? Why are these things haram in Islam? Because they will unseat you spiritually, possibly for your entire lifetime. It is said that once you are an addict, you are forever an addict, and you have to be extremely careful of ever being exposed to that substance, because you fall off the wagon. So beware, my friends. Don't think that you are some special person, unlike anyone else who's ever existed, that you can use a substance and that you will somehow be immune to its chemical power, unlike other people. I have never seen it happen. I've never met a human being, after having worked with many addicts, who had a body that was completely resistant and immune to the chemical power of substances. So the appetites of the body, they do not care about you. They are primordial. They are entirely concerned with instinctual survival. They're not evil. They're necessary for a human existence. They're necessary for an embodied existence, such as with animals. But hold on for a brief intermission. Thank you. So, Bismillah, little interruption. Thank you for your patience. The appetites seek to be satisfied, and they will consume you if you allow them to. So be careful. You want to be like a lion tamer who keeps them at check. They have a right over you. They do deserve some attention and satisfaction in their time, or in a time, but not necessarily their time. So be careful and watch over yourself. Guard your soul from full immersion in the clay. All right, so the final two things I will say is, the first being that as it concerns your spiritual practices during the month of Ramadan, those additional practices such as recitation of Quran and praying in the night and so on, I emphasize quality over quantity. If you do anything in life but you're not there, then it's as if you did nothing. In terms of spiritual practice, that's not entirely true. If you recite Quran, there's always some reward there. But if you're not there when you do it, if you're not present, if you're not mindful, if you're not attentive and contemplative, and you're just reciting, and your mind could even be wandering, you could be thinking about breakfast and dinner, then for all practical purposes, there's little value in that. So I emphasize quality over quantity. It's not how much you do, it's whether you are actually there when you do it. Are you there? Where are you? Where is your mind? Where is your attention? And you've all seen it and you've all heard it. Prayers and recitation and different acts of ibadah performed, but the person's distracted, they're not even there. and you wonder, what is the benefit of that? So certainly spiritually, the benefit there is minimal. So whatever you do, be fully present, be fully available and undistracted. Bring your full heart and attention to it. So to that extent, if you're not in the habit of practicing stillness and silence on a regular basis, and during the month of Ramadan, I would recommend an hour or more of sitting in stillness and silence, being with Allah, especially in the dark, in the night, without saying anything, but being with Allah and simply listening. If you don't have that as part of your practice, muraqabah, meditation, then you're not going to cultivate the kind of quality of presence and attention to be fully present to any endeavor in life, whether it's worship or work or your family or whatever. So spend time in stillness and silence. And I would actually highlight that as one of the most important things that you could do in the month of Ramadan, to be in a state of listening and receptivity, to immerse yourself in the divine presence. All right, so thank you for coming, everyone. Inshallah, this is beneficial. I pray that you take advantage of anything that resonated with you in this presentation, to build on it, to apply it, to see if it works for you, and inshallah, it will bear fruit for you. And inshallah, we'll continue this in the future. You can visit my Facebook page, either the Hakeem Wellness Facebook page or the TIHM Traditional Islamic Healing and Medicine page. Or if you're a friend of mine, I post these things on my profile. I post also on Twitter. I have a Hakeem Wellness Twitter account. And if you would like to know the latest work I'm doing with my project on Islamic medicine, I do have a Ramadan campaign, fundraiser campaign. And if you look at the link on the bottom of the screen here, I don't know if everyone can see that or not. There we go. So let's try that again. So Hakeem Wellness current project, HakeemWellness.org current-project. If you go, you can read about the latest activity where I'm fundraising to complete our headquarters and clinic, which is about halfway done at this point. All right, and if any of you need help for anything at all whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm at your service, inshallah. I hope that you enjoy these this last stretch of Ramadan, these holiest of nights, and that you take the things that I said to heart and you apply them and you learn from them and you benefit from them, inshallah. And I wish health and wellness and spiritual elevation for all of you and your families and your communities, and greater unity for the Muslims, and greater expulsion of illusion and conflict in our communities, and more unity and coming together in solidarity, inshallah. So take good care, and we shall meet again in a future webinar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.